In this scripture that you heard from Marcia's reading, there's all of this emphasis on the part of the metaphor where Jesus talks about bearing fruit with our lives. And that bearing fruit is the kind of opposite of death, right? Having the life kind of retract away from us. Jesus said that he came so that we might have life and have life abundantly. And having life abundantly is a process of flowering and bearing fruit. But what does it mean? It's really easy for us to interpret that in our contemporary culture as a message about productivity. But that's not what Jesus is saying in the use of this metaphor in this passage. Jesus is saying that bearing fruit is a natural outcome of remaining in love with God, that it's the outpouring of our life abundant, that it's the kind of infectious enthusiasm that inspires the people around us and makes it easier for all of us to live according to the kingdom promise of God. I have to believe, right, that General Conference vote is an example of that, right? That over all of these years, passion for God, a discipline of remaining in love with God is bearing fruit, spilling over and making change happen. Jennifer Benjamin Brooks, who's a preaching professor at Garrett Evangelical, says this: bearing fruit means engaging for ourselves as individuals and as the church in those activities and tasks that recognize and invest in the goodness of God's love by spreading that love to a neighbor whom we are called to love. The specifics of bearing fruit are left to the community as a whole and to each individual who receives the nurture that both Christ and the community provide. It's contextual, right? It's a relationship. Each and all must come to the realization that we are not self-made. We do not have today what we deserve or what we earned, but what is a gift of grace from God, right? Each and all must come to the realization that we are not self-made. Yes, we are individuals, but as Christians, the individualism so admired by the world must take a back seat to the reality that all that we are and have are as a result of the abiding grace of God. That means that when we gather together to open our hearts and minds to the presence of God, like I say at the beginning of each of our worship services, when we come together to do liturgy together, we are practicing the discipline of bearing fruit. We are investing in each other. When we stand up and turn to look at each other to pass the peace, we are practicing love for our neighbor as we have been called to love. We practice it here so that it might become so normal to us that we forget that we're still doing it when we leave and go out into other places where it's harder to live that way.